what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Brothers in Tech is a weekly podcast focused on personal and home technology, helping provide you, our fellow brothers and sisters in tech, with some information, assistance, and recommendations. Brian is currently in the market for a new Mac computer, so we thought it'd be helpful to go through the current Apple computer lineup to determine what features and options are available, and some that may be expected soon. If you've been considering buying a Mac, or you're just interested in the current state of the Mac lineup, this episode of Brothers in Tech is for you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brothers in Tech here on the Mesh.tv podcast network. My name is Alan Jackson, and over to my right, where I'm tilting my head, if you're watching on video, is my brother, Brian Jackson, henceforth the name Brothers in Tech. And Brian, how are you doing?
Honestly, do you want to
give it to me.
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit.
I know.
I'm a little bit. Well, let's just say my voice is going to be a little bit sexier than normal. So
so meaning
raspiness,
meaning very little.
It's going to be going from non-sexy whatsoever
non-existent to
maybe just a little raspy.
Slightly raspy is going to be the level. Well, I know you're not. I know you've been kind of getting over some sickness, and obviously your voice is not 100%. So this may be one of the most informative episodes of Brothers in Tech, because I got a feeling I'll be doing most of the talking.
Yeah, this may be. We'll see what the numbers come out to be with you talking more. Whether that's really helpful or not, but
just
I may defer to you for some of the things today.
When you need to tap out, you just raise your hand, let me know, and I'll jump right in and keep rolling with it. And because it's all up here, all this information ready to share. This is Brothers in Tech, in case you're just joining us for the first time. In this show, what we do is Brian and I get together and we talk technology, but very, very specifically, we talk technology for home and family or personal use. So you're not going to hear us talking about corporate enterprise level technology, business technology. We're really talking about stuff you could use in your home or on a personal basis, on a daily basis, for you or family members that you have. And it's kind of what we enjoy playing around with and trying to enhance the things in our own home lives right now. So we've been talking every time we get together. We typically share another topic that we want to dig deep into and talk through some how-tos or ideas or things to understand about certain technologies. Today, it'll be a little different in that we've never really done an episode where we talk about kind of buying options, kind of a shopping guide almost. But we thought it'd be a good time to do it. Brian, you are currently in the market for a new Mac computer. Is that correct?
Correct. Through work. So my work computer is kind of reached its rotation, or as close to reaching its rotation, to where they're going to be swapping that out. So they kind of are giving me some options of things that I need to choose from. So it's going to force me to learn a little bit about the different options, the possibilities, and the pros and cons of each of the models. So this is good timing.
Well, we just thought then let's do this. Let's have a Mac buyer's guide, because Brian, you will be buying a Mac. I mean, I think that's pretty much understood.
Yes.
But the Mac world of offerings changes every year. Every year you've got new models coming out. You've got models fading away. Sometimes some models are made obsolete. Sometimes models come out that are fairly similar to ones already existing, and you don't always know the differences. So we're going to focus on Mac buying, a buyer's guide today, really talking through some of the different models available, some things you need to understand if you're in the market to buy a new Mac computer, whether that be a desktop or a laptop or all-in-one computer. So we're going to walk through this, and Brian, maybe you'll glean some notes from this that you didn't have before and can help you with your buying decision. Yeah. Good. Yep. So as I mentioned just a second ago, Brian, when somebody is looking to buy a Mac, I mean, they're the first decision you've got to make, I think the really big decision you got to make is what is the form factor? And by that, we're talking about, is this going to be a desktop computer, meaning you want to have it sitting in a fairly permanent space on a desk or table or something else. And maybe you've already got monitors or keyboards and mice that you want to use with it or so forth. You're basically looking at a desktop Mac at that point, right?
Right.
Versus laptop or all-in-one that we'll get to a little bit later, I think. In the desktops, I'll tell you, Mac kind of, I thought, was struggling in the desktop area for quite a while. I mean, they basically just had like what's called their Mac Mini, which was their kind of entry level. And then there's super high-end Mac Pro, which is like thousands of dollars and really meant for true pros in the field. And there wasn't a lot of space in between. They were trying to get you to go to the iMac all-in-one computer for that. But I will say right now, when it comes to desktops, that we at least have another option, like at least 3 levels now that we didn't have before on desktop computers. Okay.
Yeah. And also the low end level that you're talking about, we'll get into in a minute, is not as low end as you may have remembered it to be. Right. So that's really true. Kind of there's less distinction, I think, between them, but also that makes buying maybe a little bit more challenging. So so I think this is a good thing to go over. Yeah.
So let's start talking about the desktop computers, the desktop offerings. We've got 3 of them pulled up on the screen, Brian. The Mac Mini, which was released a couple years ago. It's I don't want to say it's old, but it's been out for a couple years. It hasn't been quickly updated in the last year or two. You've got the Mac Studio, which is the newest Mac. That is the one that was just announced only a few months ago. It kind of serves as a middle ground option for a desktop computer. And then you've got the Mac Pro, which right now you see on the far right. That is the Mac Daddy. That is the current high-end one. Although I think we're going to explore in a minute, it may not be all it's cracked up to be. And it is ripe for a replacement very soon. I actually anticipate that we're going to hear about a replacement for the Mac Pro at the WWDC event here in June. My feelings are they're at least going to announce a new version of a Mac Pro. And we'll explain why that is the case in a moment.
Yeah.
But you've got all 3, Brian, and you've got prices with all 3. So already you can see the Mac Mini is in that $700 minimum range. Although to get one configured the way you want, you may be up to $1,000, $1,200 or so. The Mac Studio is that middle ground. It is really geared for, it's kind of in that, it's hard to really identify exactly who it's for. I mean, I feel like I would be someone that would benefit from a Mac Studio because I do some high-end work occasionally that would require that, but I don't consider myself a pro that I'm needing a super workhorse computer that's just able to process at the fastest speed all the time. So the Mac Studio could be something for a role like me. I think a lot of professionals are finding the Mac Studio to be kind of a good fit for them, where they're doing some graphics work, they're doing some video work, but yet they're not doing high-end broadcast work. They're not, designing gigantic art installations or anything. I mean, it's in that middle ground.
3D renderings, modeling, right. All of that is going to take a lot of processor speed. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
So the Mac Studio is a great option for somebody who needs a really high, powerful desktop computer, but at the same time isn't what they would consider to be a pro level, needing that really strong workhorse computer that's just constantly churning out high-end graphics and animation and 3D rendering and so forth. The Mac Pro, as you can see, there's a big price jump. So we went from Mac Mini at $699, Studio at $1,999, and then the Mac Pro currently is priced at $5,999, $6,000. Now, I will go ahead and tell everybody, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the pros end of things because that's not a market for us either. Neither of us are in a need for a pro level machine. I will say though, if you are somebody listening and for whatever reason you are a pro level user, even if you're tempted, I would not recommend buying the Mac Pro now at all, because there will be some major changes coming to that pretty soon. So Brian, just in general, kind of let's talk through what the differences are on this, and people need to understand what they're getting if you get a desktop Mac from one of these families, right? You want to talk processor? Is that the kind of thing we want to talk
let's talk about that, because that's going to have to come up a few times in our discussion today, right?
Yeah.
So certainly, there's a different chip, and if you are going through this buying guide, do be aware that regardless of which of the chips that you are looking at or which one that particular device has, the M1, an Apple chip, is going to be a really, really good chip. Yes. And by comparing it to a few years back, the moment that Apple went to creating its own chip, it just opened up a whole new world for what it can do with a computer. So,
yes.
So if you're someone who has a Mac already and you're back with an Intel Mac, an Intel chip from many years ago, going to any one of these chips, even just the M1, regular M1 chip, is going to be a fairly significant upgrade, and the ability to have, I think, wouldn't you say, Alan, a little bit more future proofing of that computer?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that everything it develops now is going to be made for its own chip, so the things will tend to run a little bit more efficiently.
No, absolutely. I can't recommend anybody looking at a non M1 Mac right now. I really can't, because and understand the M1 is a chip that Apple themselves have manufactured. So the key here, if you're wondering why this makes such a dramatic change in their processing and how the computers work, if you think about it, if you're the computer maker that is designing the computer to work as efficiently as possible and be as high performance as possible, and now you're also designing the chip that is actually powering that computer, you can make sure everything works together as efficiently and productively as possible. Now, Intel, the chip that Macs were using before the M1, was made by Intel, and it's a good chip. It's a good, powerful chip. They had a good relationship for many years, but it's still they're at the mercy of what the Intel company will provide them in a chip, and then they have to make it work with their Mac hardware and other equipment. So having it all in-house gives them a lot of efficiencies, and we've seen that. As you said, the performance gains are dramatic, absolutely dramatic. Anybody that's gone from an Intel chip to an M1 chip has seen dramatic improvement right away. So right now, 2 of the 3 desktop computers we're sharing with you are using M1 chips. The Mac Mini has an M1 chip. The Mac Studio, the newest one, has actually 2 different types of M1 chips in it, while the Mac Pro has an Intel. And that's why I'm saying I don't recommend anybody buy that, because even though I think what I saw is that even though the Mac Pro is like $6,000, 3 times the price of the Mac Studio, the Mac Studio's performance is actually really close or maybe even exceeding what the Mac Pro is doing already for a third of the cost. So the Mac Pro would not be a good buy right now, but I will tell you, whenever they do announce a new Mac Pro powered by M1 chips, I think it's going to be pretty impressive. And I think that's going to be a whole game changer there as well. Now, Brian, there's 3 different M1 chips that I see here listed. I see an Apple M1 chip, and then I see an Apple M1 Max and an M1 Ultra.
Yeah, and there's one more that's not even on here, is the M1 Pro.
That's right.
So I believe it's the M1 Pro, M1 Max, M1
Max,
Ultra.
and then Ultra. Yep. And just like you would expect, they get progressively more powerful as you go along. Like Brian said, the M1 chip right now, the base level M1 chip, is still a very powerful chip that you will see gained improvement if you're coming from an older type of computer. But you absolutely can keep bumping up your options. So basically, it's just telling us the Mac Mini, the only option you have for the Mac Mini is the M1 chip. Mac Studio, you can choose between the M1 Max or the M1 Ultra. When we get to the laptops, you'll see the M1 and the M1 Pro are options over there. So a lot of options floating out there.
And I would also mention, Alan, that even though the M1 chip is still, only 2 or 3 years old where it's been out, seeing that the Mac Mini is last updated in 2020 and it's an M1 chip, I would imagine that it's going to be after the Pro probably, but it's in line for probably an update fairly soon too.
Yeah.
The Mac Mini, for those that haven't kind of stuck with Mac for many years, but the Mac Mini, they went many, many years without doing anything to it. They kind of left it a very simple device. It was always a great device. It really didn't get the updates that everybody was wanting. And it seems like, especially with the new the new version that they're using with the Cinema, I mean, that's kind of showing that form factor benefit. So I think that they're going to upgrade that one certainly within the next year. But even this, as we were talking about, is such a great machine. And those are, by the way, the views of those are kind of the size differences.
Oh yeah.
You know, the Mac Mini on the left is a very thin, you know, if you want something just to sit next to your monitor, or the way I've used a Mac Mini in the past is that was my media server. I had that sitting under a TV, and it was, you know, powering movies that I had stored and all that sort of stuff. So it's a good form factor for that.
Yeah, it is. And in the Mac Studio to the right of it, it is like 2 or almost 2.5 of the Mac Mini stacked on top of each other. Right. Same size, same form factor, just taller. The difference with the Mac Studio is it does have ports on the back and front of the computer, which was something a lot of people clamored for. I mean, as nice as it is to keep a Mac very clean and pretty and have all the ports in the back, it can be a challenge when it's on top of, when a monitor's on top of it, or you're having to reach behind it constantly to get to it. Putting some accessible ports on the front, a couple of USB ports or USB-C ports, and a smart media card reader on the front was really smart. That was just a nice thing to do with the Mac Studio box for sure. So Brian, let's just kind of hit on some of these specs just a little bit. I know we had a whole episode where we talked about all these specs and explain what they are, but they have changed a little bit, and I just want to make sure people understand the differences if they're trying to choose between these different models on the desktop side. Every computer has the capability of going up to a certain number of cores on its processor, on its CPU. And you can see the Mac Mini is just a flat 8-core processor, which means it's got 8 of the actual cores embedded in the chip. The more cores, the more performance is all you need to understand with that. Now, the Mac Studio, it says, can go up to 20 cores. That's going to depend on which chip and what level within the chip you get. Each chip, some of them you have options to say, well, I want the M1 Max, but I want it with 20 cores instead of 10 or whatever the options may be. So you can really customize and get up to the number of cores you want. And again, all we're talking is cores are processing power amplified. The Mac Pro will go up to 28 cores, but keep in mind the Mac Pro, we're talking about the Intel chip still. We're not talking about the M1. So it's not a complete apples to apples comparison when comparing the number of cores between these CPUs. Yeah.
And let's maybe, clarify just a little bit, because I think people come from the PC world have always been kind of taught to think, it's a something gigahertz, processor, right? They kind of look at the speed of the processor as being the big number that you're worried about. When you think of cores, just think of, cores are almost like separations within the processor. And so if we have a great processor that can do lots of different things, the more cores you have, the more it's able to divide those processes across different things. So if you just think, if you had 2 computers that had the exact same speed of processor, but one had more cores, it means that you'd be able to do some multiple tasks simultaneously using some of that processor speed, as opposed to one. It's like bandwidth. When we talked about Ethernet bandwidth and the amount of things it could go through versus the speed at which it goes through. So just think cores are good, right? Especially if you're someone who works on lots of different tasks or lots of different very high intense tasks. It may not be a big thing for a lot of what we all do. If you're surfing the web and you're making documents and you're checking email and you're doing those things, you may not see much of a difference. But if you're doing some 2 streams of, video processing, that's where the cores are really going to come in. So, and that's where you can see the GPUs, which is the graphics processors, having cores as well, meaning that it's the ability to do the graphic, processing so much more efficiently. So I think it really comes down to efficiency too, Alan, instead of just power, right?
Right. It's efficiency. It's able to accommodate more things simultaneously. Yep. That combined with the memory, which you see at the bottom, all of these kind of work together to create how efficient and productive that workflow is for you. Different things you do on your computer will tax different parts of these differently. So for example, your CPU is all computer operations. It's just operating your computer. Anything that's not heavy on graphics needs is going to be really relying on your CPU. Then once you start to flip over to anything that involves high-end graphics work, rendering of animation, rendering of video, displaying video, all these things, that's going to hit your GPU. So if you're someone who's going to be doing a lot of video or animation, definitely 3D rendering, 3D animation, the GPU becomes even more important to you. So you may want to look at a device that's going to give you greater GPU cores on that end. And then the RAM on that third level, that is your memory. That is your kind of what your computer is able to hold and manage and do simultaneously at one time.
Yep.
Is with that memory. This is not your storage. This is not how much you can store on a computer. This is if you open up one large file over here, a large photograph, and then you open up another program over here running something and another one in the background. The more RAM, this memory, unified memory you have, the more those things can happen without bringing your computer down to a crawl and slowing it down. So if you're someone, as you can see, the Mac Mini just has a 16 gigabyte, which is still good. That's great for most people's applications. But you can see that if you start to do a lot more things within that 16 gigabytes, it's going to make your computer slow down. And you're going to see that a lot more often. The Mac Studio lets you go up to 128. So you're right away seeing a huge jump on memory.
Yep.
And then on the Mac Pro, it's 1.5 terabytes worth of memory that can happen.
That's insane.
It is.
That's
but
insane.
I will say too, memory is handled differently on the Intel chip in that processor than it is the M1. So it's not a apples to apples comparison. I don't feel comfortable saying the Studio or the Pro is almost 10 times more the memory on the Mac Studio. It doesn't quite work out that same way because the memory is used so much more efficiently on the M1 chips. But regardless, I know there's a lot of numbers here, and for most people, they're going to get just kind of the stock model that has kind of the base level on these. You're still looking at a very good performing machine, even at the low level on these. But just to know that you can customize and scale all of these items up depending on your specific needs.
Well, and it's also important to note anytime it says up to, right? So even on the Mini, that's up to, that means 16 gigabytes is the most you can get.
That's right.
If you were to upgrade it, that means, I'm guessing, Alan, it was eight gigabytes was probably the entry.
8 is the standard on the Mac Mini. You get 8 right off the box, and then you can add it to 16.
Yep.
Now, here's really important to note for anybody buying a Mac these days. When you make these choices, that's what you're locked into for the duration of the life of that, of that computer. Okay. It's not like the old days where you could buy a computer and start have some memory on it and then add more memory over time. Unfortunately, you can't do it. And that is one thing I really don't like about the Mac environment right now. I wish there was ways to keep growing and expanding it yourself, but there's not. So when you make this purchase, you need to be thinking about where you could be over the next 3 to 4 years or whatever that lifespan of that computer is going to be. Because the worst thing would be is to get one for your needs today and your needs grow over the next 3 or 4 years and your computer's just not able to keep up with it.
Yeah.
Because you're not able to go backwards and upgrade it manually. You're going to have to go get a whole new computer. So it's a shame the way it's set up, but that is where we are. So thinking about future proofing, I think, is important. Thinking not only about where you are today, but where you could be in, I say 2 to 3 years. I think that's if you can get to where you're going to be in 3 years with a computer purchase, I think that's a good spot to be in. And then maybe at year 4 and 5, you may be looking for an upgrade or another one. So,
yeah. And you may be wondering, how do I know what I'm going to need in 3 years from now? But you should imagine that if you're someone that tends to use some of the latest software when it comes out, you have some fairly intensive software that is going to get updated. And when that software gets updated, it's going to be more intense, demanding on your computer. Yep. Then you should be thinking that way. But again, don't let Apple scare you, because that's one of the things that they do and say, you can't upgrade this. So of course, spend the extra money now so they can have a lower price, but then more of an upgrade. I would just say, if you can figure out the form factor that you want and in the general area you are, and then if you have the ability to get some extra memory, think about your hard drive. To me, memory is more important than hard drive. When I'm looking at an upgrade, if I'm going to spend a little extra money, I'd rather get the extra RAM to make the processes work more efficiently rather than worrying about the hard drive. And that's me, because I tend to store so much on the cloud that I don't care so much about paying for extra space.
That's a good point. We didn't even mention, that's the last item here I didn't have up on the screen, but storage. You're right. That is a decision point you got to make. Same issue. And the problem is that the Macs will not let you go and upgrade this storage memory after the fact. So you do need to think about where ideally you're going to be with your storage needs. But like Brian said, I agree with Brian. I as much as I like keeping stuff stored on my computer, if I had to choose between upgrading my memory, my unified memory, my RAM, or my hard drive my storage space, I would definitely go with my unified memory as well, because I can always add an external hard drive to my computer and store things. I can always put in thumb drives and SD cards and other things to back up, or the cloud I can back up to, but I can't go back and add more unified memory in any way, shape, or form. So I want to make sure my computer always runs efficiently and fast and multiple things happening. So the RAM is where that happens.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, you can see here on the storage side, the Mac Mini lets you go up to 2 terabytes of storage, the Mac Studio up to 8 terabytes. At the time of its release, the Mac Pro was also limited to 8 terabytes. Again, I feel like any new Mac Pro is going to improve that. Yeah. But 8 terabytes of storage, it's a lot of storage.
That's a lot.
Space. Yep.
Yeah. And Alan, so, you're someone who does video work and storing videos and all of that. And you probably do quite a bit of that locally. You may have a need for, a terabyte is a good thing. 2 terabytes is a good thing. Yeah. For me, I have zero need for a terabyte of hard drive. Yeah. So for people to kind of grasp, when you're looking at buying, do think, if I'm someone who stores most of my stuff online, which I do in the cloud, right now I'm using 250 gigabytes of hard drive, and I don't even need to be using this much. I've got some things in here that I could offload. And if I'm buying a new one, I'd most likely go with whatever the base is. If that's 512 or if that's, 1 terabyte, that's going to be the most I'm going to do. And I think for most people, that's probably a good user experience.
I'm definitely more of a outlier case. I'm not, I definitely have a lot more. I mean, right now I've got a 500 gigabyte storage and it's filled all the time. I mean, I'm busting at the seams where I'm constantly having to take media and things I produce and ship it over to external drives just to get it off my main drive, because
need to back it up.
Back it up. Back up. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because again, when I'm working on video files and all that, I need the files on my computer. I really don't want to work with them off an external drive. So I'm working here and then I have to take the files and offload them to other drives. It's a process. And I'm already looking at, if I upgrade, I'm probably going to go up to 2 terabytes of storage just because I could use it. But you're right. I'm an outlier. Most people, 500 gigabytes on a storage is going to be more than enough for general day-to-day use, photo library, web surfing, obviously, word processing, other things that they may be doing. It's plenty. It really is plenty. So that's good. So that's the 3 desktop models, Brian. I mean, what else about these? Any other key differences? And again, I think we really just focus on those first 2 because the Mac Pro is still leaps and bounds above everything else, and also the most ripe for change. But
I would just say, if it's a home computer, home use, and you're using it for just general, family computing, right? The Mac Mini is a great machine. It is a great price for what it does. It's also a great form factor for, being able to, be a media server, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't even look towards the Studio or the Pro unless you really have intensive sorts of tasks that you are involved in: video processing, photo processing, all of these things that become a little bit more demanding.
Well, let's just remind everybody too. I agree with all that. These are desktop computers, meaning they're, even though, you can unplug it and you can take it somewhere else. I mean, they're meant to be stationed somewhere where you're kind of anticipating to do most of your work. They will not come with a monitor. You will need to provide your own monitor. But the good news is you can get any monitor that has the right kind of connection to it. These are going to have HDMI ports on the back, or I think maybe the Mac Mini does have a HDMI port. You can hook up 2 monitors to them if you have an HDMI port, and then you can also do a USB-C converter to another HDMI port and have 2 monitors plugged up. You can plug up your own keyboard and mouse, whether it's wired or wireless. So you've got USB ports on these that you can use for standard wireless or wired keyboards or mice. So you don't have to use the Apple ones. The Apple ones look nice with it, but you can really get any other mouse or keyboard you prefer to use with them. So that's the nice thing about these desktop models is they are fairly open to other peripherals that you can add to them.
Right.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about a different form factor, Alan.
All right. Why don't we go to, you want to go to laptops?
Let's go to laptops. Yep.
All right. I'm going to pull up 3 laptop models that we feel like are kind of the options right now you're looking at. All right, here we go. We have Macs have always, even though desktops are doing better sales wise, I mean, I think Mac laptops are really where Macs have been dominant in the last decade or so. They've just really put a lot more energy into their laptops, really made some great models. They've had a few years where people have not been as happy with the laptops. Keyboard has been a little iffy for people. The performance is not always really bumped up as much as it has in other form factors or other competitors even. That has changed, I say once again, with the M1 chips now rolled out. All 3 of the models we're showing here are running M1 chips. We'll examine in a moment. But I don't think you have a bad option on laptops these days from Macs. Now that everybody's on the M1 chip, I think you could go with any of these. We've got 3 models up here, Brian. We've got the MacBook Air, which is running a M1 chip. It is from 2020, so it could be ripe for an update here in the next little bit. But that is your lowest price one. That's starting at $999. That is considered kind of the light. It's a thinner, smaller laptop. It is also power wise very good, but just between all the others we're going to look at, it is the lowest powered of these 3.
Yep. And the form factor, kind of important to know. You mentioned thinner. If you haven't seen an Air before, they're designed from the hinge. They're a little thicker. So at the hinge at the back when it's closed, it's probably similar to the MacBook Pros that we're going to show you. But what happens is it thins out. Yeah, as you get towards the front end, which you're seeing right here in the picture, you can see the difference between the 2 left. Yeah. So this really is, the thinness is why you might want to do this. The portability. It is leaps and bounds. This particular one is leaps and bounds over what the MacBook Air was when it first came out many, many years ago. That was just a basic entry level. This actually, when they added the M1, it's very snappy. It's a great machine. Performance wise, you're not going to see a dramatic jump from the Air to the Pro. That's one of the things that's going to be kind of unusual, is that the Air to the Pro jump, especially at the low end, is not that dramatic. But there's some other things that I think is important for us to note. So that's the Air, and you can see it's $1,000 entry point to be able to get into that. And then you got the 13, right?
There are two different levels of MacBook Pros. And this is a little confusing, so I got to make sure everybody's clear on this. There's a 13-inch MacBook Pro, which is a little different form factor and a little different styling than the other models that have come out more recently. But they've kept this 13-inch one in the middle of the pack there. It's at $1,299 is the price starting out. And it is running an M1 chip. It is a MacBook Pro, but it is the lower powered of the MacBook Pro family. It still retains the touch bar, which is the strip across the top of the keyboard that's been on the Mac Pros for the last couple of generations. Dynamically, you can use it for interaction with your laptop from the top strip. So that's still there, and it is running an M1 chip. It is 13-inch. You can see it. It's got a thicker bezel around the screen than when we get to the next level over. The final level is the newer MacBook Pro, and they have both a 14-inch and a 16-inch. We're just showing the 14-inch right now. But these are ones that are using higher level M1 chips and also higher specs on a lot of things. And it did go up, obviously, price-wise to $1,999. So if you're wanting a pro level laptop, but you don't want to spend almost $2,000 on this thing, you do have a 13-inch MacBook Pro, which is it's a good computer. It's a good machine.
Yep.
And definitely for the cost difference, I think it makes up for the difference there. But I will also say, if you're somebody who works in a pro field, audio, video, graphics, design, I can't recommend staying at the 13-inch MacBook, because the jump in performance is dramatic going from the 13-inch to the 14-inch. the newer MacBook Pros. If you're not in a heavy, intensive graphics design world, the MacBook Pro 13-inch is a really, really solid, fast machine for your needs there.
Okay.
Even all three are fast. That's the thing, is that it's hard to sit here and say one over the other, because all three are really good, powerful computers on the end. But Brian, you got some thoughts here, right?
Yeah, no, this is where I want to bring a different perspective to this, because I've been stressing about the comparison of these three for quite a while now. And to me, I have a conundrum here of something other than just the power. The power is actually, I'm not that concerned about, because I think even the Air is going to do a lot of the things that I want to do. Right? Sure. Now, there's a part of me, I've always had MacBook Pros. I think my last maybe 3 machines have all been the Pro models. So I kind of tell myself, well, if I'm going to get it and I have to future-proof myself for the next 5 years, I may want to go with the Pro model that will allow me at least some forward, movement, giving a better processor. But here's where I struggle, Alan, is that I personally think the performance-wise, the Air and the 13 are not that different. Like if you look at some of the specs and their performance, they're really not that different. The Air actually has a better battery life, which is great, which is really exciting. It's like 21 hours of battery life or something ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But here's the big thing, Alan, is that for me, there's two elements. Going to the 13-inch is, again, not that much of a jump. And I think it actually takes me backwards in that I really do not want the touch bar on my computer. Okay. You and I have had the touch bar. You still have it now, right, Alan? I still have it now. Mm-hmm. And I despise it. I despise it not because it's the idea of it is not great. The idea initially was really exciting. And I was okay when I first got it, but I do not use it at all. And when I do use it, I find it clunky to use because of not having the physical keys there. So my personal choice is, all right, looking at the Air, and then 13-inch actually feels like a step backwards for me, right? Because of that touch bar. So I've now wiped out the 13 and said, you know what? It's not really between the 13 and the Air. It's really between the Air and the 14. Now, here's the reason why when you look at the price difference, $1,000 more. So twice as much for the 14 as the Air. But let me tell you 2 things that are really making a big difference here. One is I do like some of the performance boost that it has. It has a little better chip. But the other is the ports. The ports are what make this dramatically better for me. So, we have talked about this before, Alan, how I take my laptop to different classrooms across our campus, plug in, I have to remember what dongle to bring, and I have to have a stack of dongles with me. If you carry it on down, Alan, and look at the ports, this is where the big difference happens for me. And there we go. An HDMI port. Mm-hmm. An HDMI port on my laptop is gold for me. Like, to be able to just take my laptop and know that I can plug into a monitor, plug into a projector
without an adapter
is fantastic. Without an adapter, right? And now, yes, it's got a couple of, the other ones will have Thunderbolts, which of course you can do with the dongles and all that. But to have a dedicated HDMI port for me is potentially worth, let's say, 500 of that 1,000 just to have that the ability.
And I feel the same way about the SD card slot. Okay. My thing is I'm using SD cards every single day. That's what we shoot media on. I'm having to transfer things from it. And I have a dock right now, and I have, I've got it on there, but still I got to fiddle around, find the slot, pop it in there. I got to remember to eject it, because when I take my laptop away with me, if I could have an SD card that I could just leave in my laptop and know it's there. And even if I move around somewhere, it's still in there. That's huge for me. So I'm with you. HDMI port and the SD card slot being built into these laptops.
Yep.
Is a game changer for me. It's why when I'm up for an update, I can't, I need to be at the pro level for the work I'm doing. I can't look at the 13-inch. I've got to look at the 14 or newer. So, yeah.
And, just having one extra Thunderbolt
great.
port there is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, well, normally 2 is the max of those that I'm using at a time. So that's great. But I do have situations where I've used 3, where I have maybe my AirPods being plugged in to charge, and I've got plug in an iPad as well to make sure that I have a wired connection there. Plus, I'm plugging in the power. So to me, the ports are the big boost there. And of course, if you slide back up, and let's look back at the kind of the key distinction there.
Let's check out the stats real quick here. Just because the name wise, as you know, MacBook Air is a 13-inch display, right, just like the MacBook Pro 13 inches, so same size screen. But then you get to the 14-inch or almost a full inch bigger diagonal on the 14-inch screen. The chips, as we mentioned, the M1 chip is the default standard chip on the Air, and it's the one on the MacBook Pro as well. So that's still
that's the same chip. That's the same chip that was on the Mac Mini that we talked about that we said was good, but not as good. MacBook
Pros have both the Pro version and the Max version that you can choose for those laptops. So you do have some options when you configure your laptop at that high-end Pro level. Core CPUs. 8 or 10 cores is kind of the option on the CPU. You really can't go much more than that on the laptop. But graphics, that's the killer right there for anybody working in high-end graphics work, is you can top out at 32 cores GPU on those laptops, the high-end ones.
Yep.
Same thing with memory. 16 gigs is the highest memory you can do on the MacBook Air or the Pro 13-inch. But you can go up to 64 gigabytes of RAM if you chose to on the Pro level.
And Alan, another kind of key about that is important to note. So on the MacBook 14-inch, the one on the right, so its standard is 16, which is the max that you can get on the Air, right? The Air, it comes as a standard of 8. You can upgrade to 16. The 14 has an entry of 16. So you can go to 32. But if you go to 64, which of course I think is, if I'm not mistaken, maybe $600-700 more or something to go to that level, that automatically kicks you into the M1 Max chip. So by doing that 64 gig goes along with having the 64 gigabytes of RAM. So even though you might look at that and go, well, I don't need the 64, but that little bit more potentially gets you into a whole different processor too. So
I would love to get my own laptop up to 32 gigs of RAM. That's, to me, my dream level of being at. I'm at 16 now.
Yep.
And it's fine, but I do a lot of things concurrently all at the same time. And occasionally I get really bogged down with things I'm doing even at 16 gigs. So to me, 32 is that sweet spot I want to get to with the next machine. Yep. Storage wise, again, a huge bump up when you get to the new levels of the Pros. You can go up to 8 terabyte storage instead of tapping out at 2 like you can with the other two. Battery life, like you said, the Air is really good. 18 hours of battery life.
I forgot that the Pro was better. Okay.
The 13-inch Pro is a little bit better. Actually, the 14-inch takes a step backwards. It kind of sacrifices battery life for a lot of the power you're getting.
Especially that graphics processor.
Pros are not complaining. they're fine. They'd rather have the performance and take a little hit on the battery life if they need to. But overall, you're comparable on all three. It's not dramatic differences in battery life on all three. As you mentioned, Brian, the 13-inch MacBook Pro, the one in the middle, does have the Touch Bar and Touch ID on it. The other two, the new MacBook Air and the latest MacBook Pro, have the Touch ID sensor on it where you can put your finger on and let that register your computer. It just does it without having a whole touch bar. It's just a single spot in the corner of your keyboard where you rest your finger and get your Touch ID out there.
Alan, can I give people a quick reference? Because I had been wondering about this. So, the battery life, when you compare things that are brand new like this for 18, 20, 17, sorry, if you scroll back down now.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yep. So the 18, 20, and 17, you're like, oh, well, gosh, I hate to sacrifice in that 14-inch to get only 17 hours. I just pulled up what the MacBook Air was, the previous version, which was the MacBook Air Retina. Yeah. And that was the 2020. That was the still 2020 version. It was 12 hours.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is that basically what they've done with that Pro 13-inch is pretty insane, right? They've almost doubled the battery life they had before, but even the 17 hours, is significantly more than what a great MacBook Air was, 2 years ago. And
I think you got to think about too, what's the kind of the overall goal with battery life? For me, it's always, if I needed to have the computer up and running all day during a typical work day or typical work life, without, if I had to be on the road and traveling, could I work all day? So is that 9-10 hours of use? Any of these will meet that standard, as a new laptop. So that's good. I mean, if you're someone that you need your battery to run throughout the day, but then you're going to charge it up at night, overnight, any of these levels are going to do wonders for you. You're going to have a room to grow, room to play with on your battery life for sure there. Back when it was, 10 to 12 hours battery life, which it used to be previous generations. And then, of course, that battery life would get a little diminished as you use your computer longer and longer. It got tough to sometimes pull off a whole day of working on a laptop and without having to find a power source pretty quickly. So, yeah, these are all good. Very, very good. So, I mean, Brian, there's this is to me a little more clear cut for people as far as, to me, well, I'll take that back. No, I don't agree with that. The desktop, there's 3 very clear levels of price and power on that. Laptops, you do have that more gray area between the MacBook Air and this 13-inch MacBook Pro, but there is a big jump in not only cost, but also performance on that MacBook Pro 14-inch or the 16-inch above it. I almost feel like the MacBook Pro 14-inch is a true MacBook Pro, like capital letter Pro. The MacBook 13-inch Pro is kind of a lowercase Pro. It's like, yeah, it's got the Pro features and it is good for a lot of high level work, but it's just such a gap between that and the MacBook Pro 14-inch on everything it can do.
Yeah. Yep. No,
and I don't know how much longer the 13-inch is going to be around either, like to be manufactured. So right. I just don't know.
And Alan, just so people do know, because we kind of breezed past this a little bit, but if you are someone who's wondering like, oh my gosh, I'm used to a 13-inch, I don't need an extra inch of body size. It's not actually, I think, a full inch of body size totally because of the bezel, right? So of course you're looking at the image there, and you can see it looks a little bit taller,
a little bit,
right, for what it is, but your screen is a lot more. This is very similar to what's happened with phones recently, is that you can say, oh, I've got a 5.5-inch phone screen. That doesn't mean that the phone itself is an inch more than a 4.5-inch model if there was a bigger bezel, and the bezel is, of course, the black area around the screen. So you're getting more screen real estate. As you can see, just like the phones have done, they use the notch to stretch out the screen and just keep the place where the camera is, so that that's not as usable. So you're going to get a bigger screen. It's not necessarily, for those who have, like, I personally got a little nervous because I have a case that I use for my 13-inch, that if I went to a 14 and I just bought this case, would that be obsolete? I don't think so, because I think I have probably that 1/2-inch gap around that would actually still work. But so it's not a full inch in direction that you have to worry about, but it is still a change. So
sure. And they're all 3 very comparable sizes. Just you're looking a little bigger on the 14-inch. But of course, if I were to put the 16-inch up there, it is a noticeable.
It is truly a 2-inch diagonal.
Right. Yeah. Right. I feel confident saying that there's some really great Mac laptop models out there right now, and I don't think anybody can go wrong with any of the 3. But I do feel confident in saying that if you are going to be using your Mac in a high-end production, design, animation, rendering, video, high-end photography work, I really think I know it's a lot more money, but those 14 and 16-inch, the new ones, are really strong machines that are going to future-proof you for a long time. If you don't fall in that camp, I'm with you, Brian. I think the MacBook Air is great. And I just don't see enough difference between the MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook to really feel like that there's a reason to go with that middle option. I say you're either in the pro camp and you really need that pro level machine, or you're in a really, really strong powered MacBook Air that's going to meet your needs on everything else you need to do. So
Yep.
Where I feel like we need to be. That's my recommendation anyway.
Yep. And like I said, the ports are the big thing for me. If the MacBook Air had an HDMI port option on it, then I'd be on an Air, because I don't feel like I need what's in the Pro. but the Pro does provide so much more with that port and the availability. So, I'll find if I can stretch out the money to do it, I probably will, because it'll future-proof me a little bit more for the next few years. And I did want to mention really quickly, and we didn't talk about the 16-inch too much. There's really not a whole lot of difference between the 14 and the 16 in terms of performance. Same chip options. But I don't know if you noticed this, Alan, but the 16-inch MacBook Pro is up to 21 hours of battery life. So you gain quite a bit in terms of battery life because of the bigger size. It allows it to put a bigger battery in there, right? Which is really nice. So that's a nice thing. If you're someone who wants to be out all day and have a little bigger screen, you're gonna be able to do that with the 16 because you've got a better battery.
Yeah. Well, we'll note too, as we're scrolling through the stats on this, the 16 inch is in the middle now compared to the 14 inch, the same model. And price is about $500 more expensive for the 16 inch. You obviously have a bigger screen size. When it comes to chips and cores and memory and storage, everything's exactly the same. You can tap out the same way on both models. Battery life is the one other factor that's going to be in your favor if you go with a larger laptop. So you're paying $500 more, you're getting a bigger screen, and you're getting more battery. That's kind of where it falls down to on that end. Now, Brian, there's one other type of form factor we haven't talked about, and really it's probably the easiest to talk about because there's really only one that Apple is selling right now. And I don't know how to get rid of these other ones, so I'm just going to put all of them as iMacs just for kicks. And let me do that. Okay, never mind. It automatically bumps. So anyway, we've got two different versions here, a 4-port and a 2-port. The two on the right-hand column are our iMacs. The iMac is the kind of default all-in-one Mac that you've had around for years. They've gone through several iterations. This is the current form factor, which is a kind of looks like a large monitor just with an extra little spot along the bottom where the CPU is housed. The big thing they made the deal about with the iMacs is colors. So you can get these in different colors. They go through and show you the different color shades you can get for the one in the middle here. But they are all in one. So again, understanding if you're looking for convenience where you just want to have one machine, you know where it's going to be, you just want it as simple as possible, plug it up to a power and you're ready to go. The iMacs are great. They are all in one computers. They'll do what you need to do. The things to remember with all in one computers are if something goes wrong, you have a monitor go bad, well, that means the whole computer's out of operation. You're going to have to get the whole thing fixed. You can't swap out another monitor. Can't swap out, another CPU. These are all in one. And you're locked in. This is the screen size you're going to have on this device. I mean, if you decided you want a bigger monitor, there's not a way to do it. I mean, you're just going to have to use the monitor that's built in on the iMac. So there's some pros and cons with it, but I do think for some people that have a very specific need of where they want a computer and a good spot for it, and they're comfortable with the screen size and it's going to last them a while, iMacs are great. They're a great all-in-one computer. Definitely simplifies cables, it simplifies setup and hookups and everything else too.
In terms of beauty, if this is something that's going in your kitchen, right? Or if you have a little study nook in your kitchen or something. I mean, in terms of beauty, this is a very beautiful machine, right? Just sits, all you have is a keyboard and a mouse out and everything looks super slick. So
and look how thin that thing is and just really, really nice. It's a nice looking computer for sure. Yeah. The thing to know about the iMacs is they are using the M1 chip. So again, that's the base level M1 chip, just like the Mac Mini, just like the MacBook Air, is that base level. 8-core CPU, don't really have any options on that. It's pretty much, this is what you get. You don't see a lot of up twos here, except for on the RAM, because there's not a lot of customization on the processor. This is what you get, 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, unless you go to that 2-port version, which is a 7-core GPU. I thought that was kind of odd to be one less on that, but both will go up to 16 gigabytes of memory. The 4-port version will go up to 2 terabytes of storage. The 2-port version will go up to just 1 terabyte of storage. And then, of course, battery life is not an issue. The 4-port version has the Touch ID on the Magic Keyboard. The 2-port doesn't come with that standard. You'd have to pay an upgrade to get one with Touch ID on the keyboard. It's a little confusing. There's 2-port, 4-port. That's really the main difference, other than what you can go up to on storage between the two. but it is talking about the kind of the side ports, how many of those you have to work with. Let me get down to ports because I want to make sure I'm clear on that. Yeah, so the 4-port version has 2 Thunderbolt ports and 2 USB 3 ports, where the 2-port version just has 2 Thunderbolt ports, and that's it.
Yep.
So,
and the Ethernet there is a little bit different. It's comes with the standard Ethernet instead of the Gigabyte. So the way I've always looked at this, Alan, the 4-port is really, if you're using an iMac for work, or if you're someone that you're putting this into work, potentially you're going to have an external hard drive, right, that you might plug into it. You might have some other things. If this was a home device, as if this was a family use device that was sitting in a cool little study nook, right, the 2-port is fine because I can't imagine you're going to be plugging a lot of things into it, right? This is all in one. It's the Ethernet is plugged in the back. You're good to go, right? You've got the wireless, most likely the wireless mouth and the wireless mouth and mouse and wireless mouth, the wireless keyboard. So everything's super slick and clean, and you're probably not going to be reaching behind it to do a lot of things. But if you're using this for work, where maybe you have to plug some other things in, you potentially bring in another hard drive, you're doing some other things. I think that's where that is. So that allows you just a slightly greater performance capability. Yeah. But if you're using it for simplicity, which is why I love the iMac, that 2-port's probably just fine.
Well, let's talk about the most important reason why you might go with the 4-port instead of a 2-port. The 4-port comes available in more colors, including yellow, orange, and purple. So if you really want a yellow computer in your house, you're going to have to go with the 4-port iMac, not the 2-port.
Now I'm changing my mind.
Okay. Price wise, $14.99 is where the 4-port starts. $12.99 for the 2-port. I think you summed it up pretty good, Brian. The difference between the two, if you're somebody who needs an iMac or not. I mean, if you have a specific case for a computer, a location, a certain purpose for a computer, and you don't really see the need to expand and grow and add more peripherals or change out peripherals, then an iMac's great. I really say it. I mean, I hate to stereotype it, but somebody who doesn't want to deal with the computer stuff, I just want to plug it up, hook up turn on my keyboard and go, and less fuss and less decisions to have to make. The iMac's a great fit for all of that. So
agreed.
Yeah. Well, Brian, that is all of the Mac models that we kind of talk about and recommend. Again, 6 months from now, there could be a new version. There'll definitely, I think, be a new version of a Mac Pro. There could be an updated Mac Mini, could be an updated a MacBook Air. I don't know. All those are up for grabs over the next year. So this information could be completely out of date months from now. But if you're in the market to buy a Mac right now, the good news is you've got some great options. I think people are generally feeling more positive about the computer lines that are being released by Apple right now than they ever have been, because of the M1 chips, because of what it allows them to do, and because of the feature set that they're able to roll out with those chips included. It's just, these are some great machines. I don't think 5 years ago, I might have said you could have gone a wrong direction with certain models. Here, I don't really think there's a wrong direction. I think it's just finding one that's the best fit for your needs and what you're looking to do with it. So, yeah.
And then you have all the iPads, which, we could spend another hour talking about which of those to go into. But
not going to go into iPads today. We're just talking Macs today. That's it. We'll do another iPad buyer's guide, another episode. So that sounds good.
Yeah. All right, Alan.
That's not where we are. Yeah, yep. I think that's good. Brian, if anybody is kind of in that position that you are, that they're saying, look, I'm ready to buy. I got maybe a very specific need or situation or something, and they need some advice on which way to go. How can they go about getting a hold of us and asking those questions?
Well, send us an email at info@themesh.tv, info@themesh.tv. Let us know not only about, your experience with the Mac Buyer's Guide, but also what future topics you'd like us to get into. This is where we tend to get some of our ideas from listeners. You can also go to our website, which is www.brothers-in-tech.com. And
don't forget
to get access. It's right. -in-tech.com. The medicine's kicking in, Alan.
All right. I could tell. Absolutely. Yeah.
But you can see, get access to previous episodes, as well as start to see some recommendations that we have outside of the episodes. So come and check us out. Send us a note.
All right. All right. Well, listen, thanks everybody for watching our Mac Buyer's Guide episode today of Brothers in Tech. And we will be back with more discussion topics and episodes here in the coming weeks. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Until then, thanks a lot for listening or watching, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.